I thought I'd offer you a couple of words on all of this and some perspective, maybe with a small p on this, because I think it's a very complicated and nuanced world. And to see everything in black and white is a real, I think it just doesn't honor how difficult a situation is really unfolding here. You have ethnicities, you have religion, you have militarism, you have power grabs. All of this is going on, has been going on for, many, many years. And as I think I may have mentioned to you, I always see the situation in the Middle East as when you walked into the movie. If you just walked into the movie right now and you've seen the horror that is Hamas, the wanton killing, the deliberate mowing down of festival goers, of the taking of, now it looks like 200 captors back into Gaza. These are innocent civilians, unarmed, mothers, children, infants. If you just walked in then the rage would motivate an immense response. And to be fair, after 9/11, and I could argue this is worse as far as Israel's concerned than 9/11. After 9/11, if the U.S. had done nothing but, served up some intense, strong rhetoric, there would have been tremendous blowback on the part of the people. I don't think you politically could have gotten away with that. I'll remind you, after 9/11, people were signing up for the military. They wanted to go fight somebody. They wanted to go do something. And that same instinct and urge exists in the Middle East on the part of Israelis who feel violated. Now, at the same time, I should also say that what also exists, it coexists in Israel, is a strong sense of don't go in and obliterate Gaza or make the Palestinians, who don't even like Hamas in large measure, don't make them pay a price for what Hamas has done. So back to the movie. If you walked into the movie earlier, Gazans are living in this place of utter awfulness, the open-air prison, all of the different parallels you've heard. And so, and this is what I'm getting in a lot of your emails, one can understand what led to this, the level of frustration. Well, I can understand what leads to a level of frustration. I can't understand what led to this. Hamas did something that is absolutely unjustifiable, full stop. And the idea that I don't condone what Hamas did and it was just awful, but there's no but at the end of this. And I think that's where there's a moral confusion going on. Now, again, back to the movie, though. If you're in Gaza, you're thinking, well, what do we do? Where our movements are monitored, our state is controlled, and now you think, well, yeah, they're frustrated, they need to do something, and their pleas are being ignored by the world community. And then you go back further in the movie. Well, the Israelis were in Gaza, and they left Gaza because you guys, this is to represent the Israeli position, you Palestinians, you wanted Israelis out. No more Jews in Gaza. So they forcibly, the Israelis did in 2005, they got rid of their own people from Gaza. I mean, it was not easy. Many, there were factories and pharmacies and orchards. They said, leave them, get out, we're leaving. We're giving this to the Palestinians. And then, of course, within a year or so, Hamas was the elected leadership of Gaza, and Hamas, bent on Israeli destruction, began this whole period of terror. Hamas, and this is where you get into the nuance part of it, and I'll talk to Rothman about this, Hamas emerged because, in part, this is something else I got an email about, and it is true, in part, the Netanyahu government felt Hamas would be a useful political chess piece in all of the developments of the Middle East. It's true. The Netanyahu government felt that the infighting that would be produced between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority, which is the other major group that is involved representing the Palestinians, they've been essentially marginalized, and they just don't have the heft of these other, I'll just call them Islamic organizations, Islamic Jihad, Hezbollah, and Hamas, of course. They would be useful, the thought was, in kind of just keeping them fighting over authority, and in so doing, weakening any real force with agency to negotiate a peace with the Israelis. If you followed all of that, that's all true, what I've just told you, and it speaks to the texture of the region. And that's not even the whole movie. That's just since 2000. If you go back further, you get into, well, who was there first? But we don't even have to get into who was there. That's way at the beginning of the movie. You get into the Yom Kippur War, and you get into the 67 confrontation, and land that was captured during war. What you do with that. So you can see this is a much, much more complicated and subtle situation filled with nuance and contradiction. And so as we try to figure this out now as to what the Israelis should do, it's against that backdrop that a lot of these decisions are being made. There's a brilliant writer and thinker and philosopher. He wrote a book called Sapiens, which I really recommend to you. Even if you're not a reader, just kind of leaf through a bit of it, man. It's great. Here's a bit of, he's Israeli, okay? I'll tell you the truth, I didn't even realize he was Israeli. I've read a bunch of his stuff. Maybe I'm just, so dim. I just never focused on where he came from. Here he is speaking over the weekend, and I just like it for how he represents a little of what the Israelis are thinking and the problem and challenges that have emerged. Here's a little bit of it.
Questions are being asked about the ramifications of this crisis and how the region got here in the first place and where it is going to end up. So let's get some perspective now. Yuval Noah Harari is a historian, a public intellectual, best-selling author behind books like Sapiens, and he joins me now here in London. Welcome back to our program.
Thank you, Christian.
When this all happened, Israelis were saying, and the world was saying, oh my gosh, look at this date, October 7th, almost exactly 50 years since Yom Kippur. And they thought maybe that was the context in which to look at it. But it's not like that anymore, is it?
Oh, in Israel now, everybody's talking in terms of comparisons with the Holocaust, comparisons with pogroms, waged for centuries against Jews. Because what happened is that entire communities were slaughtered systematically. It was not an attack on military units or military bases. It was an attack aimed to simply annihilate entire communities. My aunt and uncle live in one of these communities, Kibbutz Be'eri. They hid themselves in their house as terrorists just went. The Hamas took over the entire village and just for hours moved systematically from house to house, slaughtering family after family. My uncle, who is 99 years old, and my aunt, 89 years old, they hid themselves in their house and they somehow survived. But many of my friends and family, they just received the worst news of their lives. And there is shock in Israel about the inability of the army to reach these villages in time. But again, the memories, they go back. to the Holocaust and to the pogroms. And the other thing which is really shocking and really changes the whole perspective, because we've been through these rounds of violence every 2-3 years, but the feeling is that this is completely different now, that the terrorists, they not only went after civilians, but they murdered them and tortured them deliberately in just the worst possible ways they could imagine, ISIS style. I mean, decapitations, killing parents in front of children. And the third thing is, they didn't try to hide the atrocities. They deliberately wanted people to see the atrocities, even down to filming them and posting them online on social media. And you ask yourself, why would they do that? And the impression is they just wanted to, it's psychological warfare, again, ISIS style, aimed not only to spread terror, but to sow seeds of hatred that will ensure that this turban conflict will go on for generations. You know, part of the background is the approach for a deal between Israel and Saudi Arabia, a peace agreement that should have included also some improvement in the situation of the Palestinians. And this is the background to this attack. And Hamas, since its foundation, never accepted the existence of Israel and never accepted any attempt at peace. The aim was not just to destroy Jewish communities, but to assassinate any chance for peace.
And so many
that's
children
great.
as
Stop
well,
there,
as you
Albert. I think that
mentioned.
I wanted to set both the context, which I think, and that last point that he makes, I think is critical. It's the point that I was making here the other day, which is that, you know, committed to derailing any kind of peace plan. That's where Hamas is. And so if it takes this big an attack, this kind of wanton violence against civilians to overturn, and it also exposes the Israeli military and government as asleep at the switch. So it begins a lot of rancor within Israel, and it gets the Saudis to pull out, which is pretty much what's happening. It's Saudis, and they were about to normalize relations, and now they're in a very tough spot. I mean, how do you do that in the face of what will now be Israeli aggression, right? Then they've succeeded. Then that's Hamas's deal. So, hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.